go over how this world came to be in Mortal Engines.
Okay.
Because it's a post-apocalyptic, dystopian, steampunk, futuristic, science fiction, fantasy, young adult fiction novel, or a series of novels. How did the world get to that point?
So to get a sense of the world of Mortal Engines, a good place to start is to ask, what would the world look like if everything went wrong? If all the world leaders on the news made the wrong decisions, talked too hard, pushed too far, and failed to pull back before it was all too late? Well, there would be a war, a world war. And think of the old joke. What weapons would World War III be fought with? The answer is, I don't know, but World War IV would be with sticks and stones. But we know that even if everything were obliterated by a cataclysmic global holocaust, the survivors would still have access to remnants of today's technology, and pockets of civilization would spring up, like shoots after a forest fire. Gone would be the global trade routes, the infrastructure, the electricity supply, the water supply, the global communications network. But amongst the survivors would be machinists and computer technicians, mechanics and tradesmen, engineers, doctors, historians, and sundry men of letters. Old trades would be revived, certain professions would find favor, others would fall out of it. And geographically isolated, these pockets would build new primitive cultures from the wreckage of today's technological advancements, and man would return to a state reminiscent of Carl Jasper's Axial Age, which ushered in the Persian, Indian, Chinese, and Greco-Roman civilizations. Although the precise character of the future post-apocalyptic Renaissance is impossible to predict, for who knows what would be destroyed and what would survive, one thing would remain constant: the need for resources. So what we can imagine, if we think about the world that gave rise to the world of Mortal Engines, is that humanity would be reset, as it were. It would go back to a period in which there would be basically competition across the earth between two breeds: the civilized man, the citizen, that is, and the nomad, the citizen and the nomad. The citizen settles on the land, mixes his productive labor with resources, draws sustenance, and generates wealth. By contrast, the nomad, or the barbarian, as the civilized man was wont to call him, roams the earth in continual search for resources and wealth, mostly to be taken by force or threat of force from civilized man. And we can see this in history. The great Chinese civilization was marauded for centuries by Turkic horsemen from the mountains. Early Rome was nearly erased from history by Germanic nomads. And of course later Western Rome fell to their descendants. Ancient India was invaded and transformed by Aryans, cousins of the same tribesmen, who wiped out Europe's indigenous inhabitants, and to whose Proto-Indo-European tongue practically every European language traces its history. But here's the rub. The life of a nomad is hard, and throughout history, the same fierce nomadic warriors who swept tsunami-like across the civilized plains soon settled into the homes and palaces and became attached to the land of the people they conquered. Within a generation or two, gone were the endless caravans on horseback or camel, and yesterday's marauders became today's rulers. With the passage of time, the city dwellers built up defenses that even the fiercest nomads could not breach, weapons and supply chains that more than made up for the heretofore intractability of civilized man's militaries, tied as they were to their unmovable cities. Nomads were pushed further and further into smaller and smaller territories, until today, the Mongols, who terrorized the whole of Eurasia, are looked upon as quaint steppe horsemen, a harmless relic of a forgotten time. For today, it is obvious that our cities, interconnected, served by great national and transnational supplies of gas, water, electricity, telecommunications, and plugged into global shipping routes, railways, and highways, have access to the whole world. Today's nomads, rather than having the advantage of mobility, are today the isolated ones, not their settled, civilized rivals. But what would the world look like if everything went wrong? If everything was obliterated that conferred on today's cities their irresistible advantages over nomads? The life of the nomad, by contrast, would become considerably more lucrative. However, the survivors of the last Great World War would remember the comforts and advantages of city life and would wish there were a way to remain in the city but also enjoy the advantages of nomadic mobility. In The World of Mortal Engines by Philip Reeves, one man, Quirk, finds a solution to this problem. He discovers a way to convert an entire city into a mobile settlement, capable of traversing the land in search of fresh pastures and smaller settlements, fixed and similarly in traction, to overwhelm, destroy, dismantle, and digest. Europe and Central Asia become a vast hunting ground, populated by great mechanical organisms, self-contained cities in traction, who roam the land in continual search of prey. The inhabitants of these trundling city-states quickly grow accustomed to a life of municipal Darwinism and forget that man once lived and roamed on the hard, dirty ground below. Opposing the new mechanized breed of nomad is a civilization behind the mountain passes of Central Asia, an anti-traction league of cities who, like their ancient predecessors, keep a watchful eye on the barbarians outside the gates. Life for the new civilized man is a blend of an ancient agrarian life and what technological advancements are preserved from the ruins of today's civilization. And thus, the ancient stalemate between the nomad and the citizen has returned. Settlements beyond the Great Wall are easy prey for the traction cities, who in turn are bounded by the Atlantic Ocean and the Great Wall to their east. And that, basically, is the world of Mortal Engines.
So let's very briefly go through the story and the characters. And we'll start with the very beginning of the book, and I'm just going to read the first little section. And then we'll talk about it. It was a dark, blustery afternoon in spring, and the city of London was chasing a small mining town across the dried-out bed of the old North Sea. In happier times, London would never have bothered with such feeble prey. The great traction city had once spent its days hunting far bigger towns than this, ranging north as far as the edge of the ice waste and south to the shores of the Mediterranean. But lately, prey of any kind had started to grow scarce, and some of the larger cities had begun to look hungrily at London. For 10 years now, it had been hiding from them, skulking in a damp, mountainous western district that the Guild of Historians said had once been the island of Britain. For 10 years, it had eaten nothing but tiny farming towns and static settlements in those wet hills. Now at last, the Lord Mayor had decided that the time was right to take his city back over the land bridge and into the great hunting ground. So the author right there almost describes London as a dragon that was hiding like Smaug from The Hobbit as a hoarder of possessions and wealth that sleeps every now and again and lives off scraps, but eventually will become really hungry and almost desperate and will need to go out for bigger prey. So the dragon will put himself at potential risk because dragons can be killed, no matter how scary they are, as almost every myth and folk tale tells you.
Yes. It's an interesting. It's quite a striking characterization of London, because London has always represented peace, civilization, culture, all those sorts of things. And so especially to someone from, let's say, the British side of things, to immediately associate London with predation is a very striking image to be confronted with. The idea that London isn't a place that people go to, but rather a place that people run from. In the olden days, in centuries gone by, there was the national myth that the streets of London are paved with gold, and people came from all over Britain to London to seek their fortune. And here we see London seeking other people's fortunes.
It reminds me of an American company moving their manufacturing to another country like China, where it makes that corporation more nomadic.
Yes, well, London, in a way, now that I think about it, is a place that sucks up a lot of resources. During the 80s and into the 90s, London had always been the economic hub of Britain, but now London is also really the only part of Britain that genuinely generates wealth, or at least seems to generate wealth. In the north, the industrial base is barely a memory these days. The north of England, centre and north of England, used to be England's industrial base. That's where England generated its wealth. They manufactured everything, and now they manufacture practically nothing. But London has the finance sector, or the British equivalent of Wall Street, basically. And in England, it's a really big problem for a lot of people who find that they have to move towards London. So they're getting sort of sucked in by London. But now it's so expensive to live in London that people have to live a 2-hour train ride away and commute into London every day. So London has become very big and powerful, and it has its claws, its grasp reaches further and further and pulls in the manpower, the talent, the resources into its core. One might even say into its maw.
Right, and look at the different layers of London in the book. You'll see at the bottom what they call the gut is more the lower than working class. It's basically the menial labor. Then you get further up to tier, I think tier 4 and tier 3. You start to get to the middle class, and then tier 4 is upper middle class, and then 5 is the very top, and that's where the rich and the powerful live, including the Guild of Engineers. What's interesting to me is what buildings are on the very top of London, and the ones that managed to survive millennia. And I know it's St. Paul's Cathedral was one of them. And I think pieces of Buckingham Palace, but I forget.
Yeah, I know that it's St. Paul's. I don't know if Big Ben is there. I don't recall. The most striking one is St. Paul's, especially with the big cross at the top. One thing that is unusual about London in this world is that it seems to be remain very English, very ethnically homogenous. All of the names of the Londoners are quaintly English names. Some of them I think fictitious, but some of them seem pretty normal, pretty standard names. So it would not be terribly surprising to come across someone with a name like those characters. They speak English. So even back in 20 years ago, London was very, very cosmopolitan. In fact, London has been cosmopolitan, multicultural for a long time. But especially today, where London is now minority English, the vast majority of the people living in London aren't English at all. So it would be interesting to go back and see whether that is accounted for at all in the construction of the world, or whether the names of the characters given by Philip Reeves are simply typically English names that the people, whatever their origin, adopted as they merged in, and that the Anglish of London and Mortal Engines is just a very well blended mix of whoever was in London back in the day, back in modern times. But I would have expected that in the London Mortal Engines there would be some names reminiscent of Indian names or of something else. One of the notable ethnic minorities in London. But there's none of that at all.
The only two groups you'll actually see in the book are Chinese and British.
Yeah, because of course the Americans were completely annihilated, at least according to this story.
Although, didn't Anchorage survive?
That's right, because Anchorage survived because they left Anchorage on a boat, and they basically crossed from Alaska to eastern Russia. Okay,
and then they came back, right?
Yeah. Well, in the story, of course, they've Anchorage of the Mortal Engines world now skates around the top of Northwest Europe, and in the second book makes its way ultimately across the Atlantic Ocean. So the other side of the continent, coming back to America from the other end.
And there are only two main means of traveling, which is airship or one of these traction towns.
Yeah, and airship it's really just what were they called? Ziggurats?
Yeah, ziggurats, dirigibles.
So they've lost the modern power of flight. They don't know how to construct aeroplanes, and I suppose it's a neat idea that they remember that people could fly. That is, the survivors of the Great Apocalypse must have remembered that people could fly, but they didn't have the means, or they never worked out how to reconstruct aeroplanes. But making basically hot air balloons with a cabin and some propellers, that seemed to work for them. But it is a bit curious to me that the same people who can turn a city into a giant city on wheels wouldn't be able to work out aeroplane technology, unless the issue is not the technology as much as it is the resources.
The fuel.
Yeah. It might be that there just isn't enough fuel to make it a viable mode of transport anymore.
And that does make sense in the context of the world of Mortal Engines.
Now, where everyone is resource hungry.
Exactly. I wanted to move on to the characters, and specifically to not look too closely at Hester Shaw just yet, but I wanted to look at Catherine Valentine and Thomas Natsworthy, and that relationship, because it's Tom becomes smitten with Catherine Valentine. She's the daughter of the head engineer. Is that who he is? The chief of the engineers? Yes. And Tom wants to be an engineer, but he comes from too low down.
No, not quite. Valentine is the chief historian.
That's right. Okay.
And Tom is a historian working in the museum. He's an apprentice historian, third apprentice historian. And of course, he dreams to become a high-ranking historian one day. And Valentine's daughter is neither historian nor engineer. She's just a very wealthy girl from another city. So she's a sort of foreign princess.
And she does get, I wouldn't say that she falls in love with Thomas Natsworthy, but she is smitten with him in an interesting way, or she's fascinated by him. And it shows in how she interacts with him. And I think that he misreads that as love, or as like something maybe more sexual. Did you get that?
Could be. Yes. I think this is where we get to a very important point about the Mortal Engine series, which is that it is young adult fiction. And the way I think of young adult fiction is it's really teenagers being teenagers in extraordinary circumstances. And although there are some elements of the I have some criticisms of the of Mortal Engines. One thing I think Philip Reeves does pretty well is portraying teenagers qua teenagers. That is, Thomas Natsworthy, for example, is a very flawed hero. He's really not. He's not exactly an anti-hero. He's a not hero. He's not heroic. He is a little brave. He is brave at points, but he's certainly no warrior, and he's not really even an adventurer.
He reminds me of the hero of Ready Player One, which I just saw this last week. And the hero he's the main character in the book. He's kind of who we see the story through. He's supposed to be the hero, but he doesn't do anything heroic. There's other people around him that make things happen, and he's just kind of like C-3PO, just kind of following along and just, where are we going next? We got to go over here. Oh, no, we got to go over here.
Yeah.
And then reacting to it. You could take him out of the story, and it wouldn't change the story.
Not an awful lot, no. Besides a couple of, I guess we could call them mechanical considerations, helping Hester Shaw when she's injured initially, and some small details like that. He probably is a pretty realistic depiction of a very soft teenager without much life experience. But I imagine it's hard to say. But going back to the question about Tom and Catherine, I think it is pretty much teenager being teenager. Tom's 15, Catherine's about the same age, maybe 14, 15, Romeo and Juliet age type. And he's besotted with her. She fancies him. She thinks he's cute. He thinks she's beautiful. And if this were a much slower paced story, there would be some scope for them to sort of meet and have a bit of a courtship before things really heated up. But as it is, he doesn't get the chance. But you can see that that's where what would happen would be a lot of awkward teenage romantic dialogue. So maybe it's for the best.
Well, what happened is he wound up with Hester, which is funny, who is the angsty girl with something on her face, basically, with a facial blemish. It's a really bad one. I mean, she lost her nose, one eye, and her lip is fucked due to a sword when she was a child. But he spends the whole book pining after Catherine and thinking about, being on tier 5 and holding her in his arms. What's funny is, meanwhile, Catherine is slumming around with some guy from the gut named Bevis Pod.
Yes.
And she's fallen smitten for him.
Yes.
So it seems like she has this, what's it called? She doesn't fall in love with boys, but she's got this mother nurturing thing.
Yeah. I think it's
or more of a pet thing. Like, this is my pet from the lower tiers.
I think slumming is probably a good way of putting it. what was that film with? Trying to remember, was it Matt Damon or Leonardo DiCaprio? I keep on. Back in the 90s.
Titanic.
No,
Titanic.
Well, there's
No?
Titanic, but there's the one about the young guy from Boston, like working class background in Boston, and turns out he's some kind of mathematical genius.
Oh yeah, that's Good Will Hunting.
That's right. Good Will Hunting. Was it DiCaprio or Matt Damon?
Matt Damon. Matt Damon wrote it.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck wrote it, and Harvey Weinstein produced it. There's a really funny story about they were shopping it around for a couple of years, maybe about a year actually, until it finally got to Harvey Weinstein. And Harvey Weinstein's one of these guys. He's a visionary. You know, he's crazy. He's a sex pervert, but God, the guy knew what to do. And they said, okay, if Harvey can't make this movie, then nobody can. So Harvey decides they aren't going to use De Niro as the teacher. They were going to use Robin Williams. So that got Harvey excited. But there was a scene that they'd written in where the teacher gives Will Hunting a blowjob. And it was a scene where they actually kiss, and then he goes down on Will Hunting. And it's like just a one-off. And they wrote it in the script to see if anybody noticed.
Ah.
Harvey Weinstein was the first person to notice.
Uh-huh.
Like when they signed the contract, he's like, yeah, this is a great script and I'm really excited to work on it, but you guys got to get rid of the blowjob thing. You're not funny. Anyways, yeah, there was that story, but I think that Titanic is more relevant here because it does take place on this big ship. And Rose is a woman from the top tier, and Jack is a immigrant painter from Ireland, or artist from Ireland, who's on the bottom tier. And somehow or another, they cross paths, and there's this bond that is formed.
Yes, I think that's a good way of putting it. And I'm hesitant to read too much into Catherine's romantic motivations, partly because Mortal Engines is really written to be a page turner, and so Catherine's liaisons first with Tom and then with Bevis are just very useful ways of pushing the story forward, and also teenage girls who are pretty and sheltered and bored, let's not forget that she's quite bored, are very, very liable to develop a fascination for really anyone or anything that's even slightly out of the ordinary.
So the reason why I think that's interesting, the character of Catherine and why she kind of bounces between two men who are lower than her stature, is because she's going to be a character in the movie. And when you look at this book, after listening to it, reading it, how do you think you can translate it into a movie? Because you said it's just a page turner. And page turners just get you going from one event to the next event to the next. So it's kind of like you jump from one sequence to the next with maybe a little bit of character development in the middle. Filmed as it is written in the book, I don't think Mortal Engines would be that interesting.
No.
So Philippa Boyens, Fran Walsh, and Peter Jackson had a big challenge to take this book, and actually Peter Jackson bought the rights to this back in like 2003.
Really?
So he's been working on it. Yeah, he's been working on it since then.
I had no idea.
He didn't direct it. He gave it to his right-hand man, a guy he's been working with since he was basically a kid. His name is Christian Rivers. And I think it's because Peter Jackson just didn't want to direct, and he wanted to write and produce and deal with the marketing in the studio, and then to leave the kind of the hard and labor intensive job to somebody who's young and you know more down to do this kind of crazy stuff. So Peter Jackson will always be watching over his shoulder, because this is Christian Rivers' first film, I believe. He directed some of The Hobbit. but Peter Jackson will be watching over him the entire time. So the point is that they had a huge job adapting the book into a 2 to 3 hour movie. So what do you think will be cut? Or what would you cut from the movie?
I think there are, if we start with Catherine, I think that there are a lot of scenes of Catherine that don't really tell us anything more about her. It's really just Catherine doing what we expect her to do. Having said that, Catherine, of course, being the prettiest actress being portrayed by the prettiest actress, would probably need some screen time. So I reckon a lot of the build-up towards the main scenes will be condensed. You've got for example, at the very beginning, there's this whole bit about how Tom is bored dusting things in the museum, and then he sneaks out and he goes and has a look. We know from the trailer that one of the opening scenes will be of London consuming salt water. So I imagine
Salt Hook,
sorry. And then so I imagine it would be something like London, trundling along, looming over Salt Hook, and then it could be a cut to a very quiet scene inside the shaking museum, where Tom sort of has a quick look to see that the coast is clear, and then runs out. I mean, it wouldn't take more than maybe 20 seconds to establish that he's in the museum, he's bored, he's heard that there's something really cool going on, and he goes out there. So I think a lot of the dialogue that simply sets the stage is going to be condensed. It has to be if they're going to keep the main story. Obviously, a lot of the internal monologues will be conveyed through generic facial expressions. But as to what parts of the plot, look, that whole traveling that Tom and Hester do initially, where they're walking along until they finally get picked up by a town and something like that. There's not an awful lot there. It's basically one scene. She's annoyed at him, and then she permits him to help her trundle along, and then the next scene could probably be that they come across that town where they get picked up. That sort of thing. A lot of it is in the novel is just to move it along, just so that there is a semblance of coherence, and that it's not just cutscenes. But in the movie, I think they can get away with a lot more.
Yeah, there's a production art from the film, and I'll put it on screen. It's a picture of Tom and Hester looking over a rock at the, what's it called, the bazaar or the gathering of the smaller traction towns and the trading post. The trading post.
Yeah.
So that might hint that what is it? That might hint that they wind up finding the trading post right when they leave or fall off of London, and completely delete the Speedwell incident. Because the Speedwell, they just get captured, and they get captured, drugged, imprisoned, and then they are attempted. The mayor of Speedwell attempts to sell them off as slaves at the trading post, but Hester manages to kick open the wall of the prison, and they escape.
And if I recall correctly, there's really nothing else after that. They get rescued by Anna. She knocks them out, and we hear no more of them. Yeah. Okay.
They get captured by Anna on the what's it called? The Jenny Hanover, right?
Captured, rescued. I mean,
whatever. We find out they get captured later.
Yeah, but if we think of what's the town they're captured by? Speedwell. So, in the second book, they run into a bit of trouble. They pick up that gas bag of a novelist, and he brings trouble with him. But the Speedwell incident, I think, could be fairly eliminated from the movie, because once they escape Speedwell, that's the end of Speedwell's involvement in the story. Speedwell, in fact, Speedwell really just functions to get them from where they fall out of London to the trading post.
And what Anna Fang does is gives a lot of exposition.
Yeah.
She brings them up in the Jenny Hanover, which is her airship, and they go to Airhaven, which is a floating city in the clouds. And it's kind of like the global trading post.
Yeah.
People bring stuff from all around the world. I guess we could call it like a modern day New York City, or even London. But what happens is when she's flying them to Airhaven, they look down and they see an old traction town, big, about as big as London, and it's slowly being picked apart by these mechanized parasites.
Yeah, well, smaller, what they call them, suburbs, some kind of...
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So she tells them about the life cycle of a traction town.
Yeah.
Which is good exposition, and it's good world building. And then eventually she takes them up to Airhaven, and that's when RoboCop comes in. And I don't understand Shrike. It's one of those characters that's really, really cool. I like the idea of the stalkers. I think it's a cool concept. But at the end of the day, he's just RoboCop.
Yeah. And a kind of evil RoboCop.
Well, yeah. But I just don't understand what his overall point of the story is. Even though he's like a dog, he's something of Hester's past, maybe, that was interesting. He's going to be in the movie.
I'm sure. The thing about Mortal Engines is the characters. So much of the characters is really just about having someone inserted in a later scene who can perform a particular function. All the way along, Shrike is just there, I guess, to add tension. And the one part of the story where he really makes a difference is when they're about to be killed by the pirates. Then he comes in and basically saves them before before his showdown. But beyond that, he doesn't play much of a role. But it seems to me that in book 3, when they've got that whole army of those new Shrikes, new stalkers, that's where it comes into play. So Shrike himself in the first book is really more of a bit player, but I think it's foreshadowing. I think it just establishes it establishes in the mind of the reader the fact that there is this area of technology where they can produce these monstrosities. But again, the problem with the concept of these stalkers is that it suggests a very strangely balanced or even discombobulated level of technological advancement, where they can monstrously revivify fallen soldiers and turn them into RoboCops. But at the same time, they don't have any proper computing technology, and everything is still mechanical.
That reminds me of Dune, because Dune had the Mentats. They didn't have computers. The computers weren't allowed.
Well, but you see in Dune...
And it's actually a good book.
Yeah. I mean, that was thought through very carefully, and that's central to the story, because those Mencats are basically a sort of superior race. Right. And that's a big part of the overall philosophy. That's the philosophical questions that Dune raises and explores. In the case of Mortal Engines, it's just having some sort of newfangled monster, something that introducing something to the story that would otherwise run out of steam really after the first book. No, you could probably continue with the second book. I guess there'd be enough to push it to the second book, but without introducing something entirely new and crazy like the Stalkers in the third book, there's just no way for it to go. It's just going to be more of the same.
There is one great thing about Shrike, is that he is the only key, actually the second key we have, no, third key, to Hester's past. She is the raison d'etre. I think I pronounced that right. Raison d'etre. Okay.
Yes.
For the story to actually exist. And Shrike is what saved her from dying after the incident that scarred her face. It's a funny sequence that Hester Shaw watches Thaddeus Valentine kill his mother. And he basically
kill her mother.
Then he basically slices her face off, and then pushes her out the window. She winds up floating ashore and being picked up by a stalker named Shrike. And instead of cutting her head off and putting it on his mantelpiece, he kept her alive. And they lived together for years and years and years and years. I don't think the story really tells how they split up or why they split up.
Oh, it does say that she escaped. She ran away one day. If I recall correctly, it does say that initially she had amnesia. She didn't remember why she came to be with Shrike. But over time, the memory of what happened to her parents returned to her, and when it returned, she formed a determination to hunt down Valentine. I think it's also very strongly suggested that she had a good idea of who Valentine was. Also, we know from the end of the book that he's actually her birth father. So there's that twist. But what I do want to just raise as a question is the idea of the strong female characters in Mortal Engines. Because of course the heroine is Hester. Another heroine of the story is Anna Fang, and she's the greatest pilot. She's the really the leader of her movement. Catherine is the one who shows the greatest moral courage. I'm just trying to think of who else. We've got the mayor of London. We've got Valentine, who proves to be a very, shall we say, morally flexible character. And most of the other, and of course Tom himself is not heroic. Hester is very heroic. Tom is not. And I can't help but sense that Philip Reeves wanted to emphasize the strength of the female characters and did not make much of an effort to develop admirable men and boys in his story.
That's a good point. There are very few admirable or even heroic boys in the entire universe. They all seem to be self-serving or cowards, or complete cowards, like Tom. Tom's a coward. But at the end of the day, Hester finds use for him and keeps him around, so to speak. Yeah, that's a really good point, because there's a character in the prequels called Fever Crumb, and she was one of the Order of the Guild of Engineers. I think the only female to ever be in the Guild of Engineers. And she lived a couple hundred years before Hester did. And then Hester is the dynamic force. But she's a strong female character that is scarred and insecure and depressed and very teenage-like, very much like an angsty teenage girl with a facial blemish. Like, nobody loves me.
Yes.
I'm ugly.
Yeah. You showed me an image of a girl who dressed up as Hester with a little it's not a mask, it's a bandana, like a bandana around the bottom half of her face with a scar across her eye, drawn on presumably with eyeliner, and I think she has a cape and a sword in her hand. And I expect that in the movie, her ugliness will be far less severe than is described in the book. I think in the movie she'll have a sort of dashing scar in a way that in the past would have been reserved for dark, mysterious, but ultimately heroic male characters. Not like Scarface or sort of hideously disfigured characters, but if you think of certain sort of Dirty Harry type characters, they usually have something hard about them, a tattoo somewhere, some minor scarring, a dash across the forehead, or some kind of line across the eye, or on the cheek, or something like that. And I suspect in the film we'll see that although she is scarred, she's not disfigured in the way that the book would have you believe.
The trailer shows that she has both eyes. The shawl, we can call it the shawl, or the scarf that covers her face, goes up above her nose bridge line. So in the book, her eye is slashed, so there is no eye.
It's just one eye.
The front part of her nose has been cut off, so she's got kind of a pig nose, and then her upper lip and lower lip are curled because he cut her lip in half. So it's kind of like a cleft palate. Babies who are deformed and born with a cleft palate. Yeah. It's kind of like that, with a pig nose and one eye. Now, in the movie, we can totally see that she has both eyes. And she's actually played by a Icelandic soap opera actress.
Actually, looking at the trailer, I've just paused on that on 34 seconds in the 1 minute and 29 second trailer, and I've got it fortuitously right on the point where she puts down the telescope, and she's looking up at London with the red shawl. She looks, just that portion of her looks like a young Gillian Anderson. Remember from the X-Files? Yeah. She's got that same...
Yeah, well, the red hair.
The red hair, but also the eyes. And
Yes.
I'd have to look on. I haven't actually seen what she looks like with the shawl taken off. But my immediate thought when considering how this would be adapted to film would be, well, they're definitely not going to make her as ugly as she is described in the book. And I just see now an article from December of last year. The headline is "Mortal Engines. Fans want to know why the book's heavily scarred lead is now flawless."
It almost feels like it's the PR company hired for this movie putting stuff out there, because it's too perfect of an article for somebody to write about. It's too perfect. The fandom for this series is almost non-existent. It's tiny. It's smaller than Hunger's Game was before it became a movie. I don't think somebody would have written that article. I'm just rambling at this point, man. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, it's a distinct possibility. I mean, so much of what goes on is just marketing that's paid for in advance. But I would be surprised if in the film Hester Shaw is made out to be it appears as ugly as she's described in the book. I just don't.
We don't know either. We don't know because this is just the teaser trailer.
Yeah.
And things could change between the time that the movie is released.
Oh, yes.
And
yes. Well,
we're only seeing what I believe we are seeing in the teaser trailer is what they would call the sizzle reel, which is something that the filmmakers would take out to investors to get them to open their pocketbooks. Like, look at this. You thought Transformers was awesome with giant robots and Pacific Rim. Now here's giant cities on wheels.
Yes, that's right.
Well,
I suppose it's a form of A/B testing, because they'll say, okay, let's put Hester Shaw out there as a generically pretty actress with maybe a mysterious little scar, if anything, and see whether the audience, the core, the early adopters make a big deal out of it. I predict that there will be some controversy about it, but that ultimately, if she's flawless in the teaser trailer, I predict that there's going to be some sort of lip service to a scar in the final product, but nowhere near as gruesome as described in the book. And I say this for two reasons. One is that this is a film aimed at teenagers and people with the mental capacity of teenagers, so pretty much almost everyone between the ages of 20 and 40 these days. and the men in the audience, well, I hesitate to call them men, but anyway, the men in the audience are not going to want to look at a hideously ugly woman for an hour and a half. And the girls themselves don't want to have a hideously ugly character to dress up as when they go to their parties or come next Halloween, right?
But to have a woman with a very distinctive scar over one eye without losing the eye would be fantastic for them. And, this is going to be makeup tutorial 101.
Yes.
When the movie comes out, we're going to have makeup tutorials from, bored white girls from here to infinity. And it's going to be fantastic,
Yeah, exactly. So in that article, which may or may not have been pre-written, paid for, I would be very surprised to see Hester Shaw with the gruesome scarring that is given by this woman on Instagram, Anna Langham. I suspect that it's going to be something a lot more palatable, because the men in the audience don't want to see that, and the women in the audience don't want to be that, to paraphrase a common expression.
And then I think one of the last things I wanted to discuss this time around was the genre. It's a mix of genres. The official genre would be steampunk, and I think it'd be the first steampunk movie made outside of a couple movies like Wild Wild West that dip its toe inside of steampunk with technology and design, but don't go fully in. And this is fully going in at steampunk. Yeah. We've seen diesel punk with Mad Max. Yes. We've seen aquapunk with Waterworld. I think you can call it aquapunk.
Yeah, yes, you could.
Space opera is Star Wars.
Yeah.
Sci-fi would be Star Trek.
Yeah.
Fantasy, Lord of the Rings. So, dystopian science fiction or dystopia would be Hunger Games.
Yeah.
And possibly even, I forget the name of the series. It's the one that just had the sequel. Anyways, we've never seen a full steampunk movie.
Not that I can recall. No. I think it'll be refreshing from the perspective of special effects, because we've had more than enough films that depict a heavily computerized world, a heavily digitized world, and it'll be, I think from that perspective, it'll be quite refreshing to see a depiction of a world that is neither digitized nor computerized. A world that is largely not automated, and which in some ways is very advanced technologically, but in other ways which is still very primitive.
Okay, so the genre was cyberpunk, and the movie was what was it? Blade Runner. That's what I was talking about. Cyberpunk and Blade Runner. Steampunk is a genre of science fiction that has a historical setting and typically features steam-powered machinery or clock-powered machinery rather than advanced technology. So a style of design and fashion that combines historical elements with anachronistic technological features inspired by science fiction. So a computer would be what computers were in the 1940s.
Yeah, and but of course the flying, what they fly on is ziggurats or zeppelins rather than aeroplanes
with propellers.
With propellers, yes, and also in London they're getting about in tunics.
Tunics,
rather than well, at least in the book. Remember, Tom wears a tunic. Everyone wears a tunic.
It's like a bib, right?
Well, a tunic, well, it depends on what type, but a tunic is basically, go back to early medieval clothing, before they didn't exactly wear trousers. It's just like basically a big dress. Just a full length.
Yeah. Okay.
It's basically a dress with sleeves, because trousers were a little trickier to make, and tunics were fairly convenient because when you needed to go, you could just lift it up, and you didn't have to worry about it fitting or not fitting. It was just a big piece of cloth, and you could basically wear underclothes under that pretty easily. And remember that something like buttons was a technological advance in, I think, the 12th or 13th century. So until that time, they didn't have buttons. They had belts, they had sashes. So, imagine if you have to make clothes out of just big pieces of cloth. What's the simplest thing to make?
A tunic, or a dress, yeah, or a muumuu, or a poncho.
Yes, exactly. And just an interesting language note. The word skirt and the word shirt are cognates. That is, they used to be the same word.
Is that right?
Yeah. And initially, when you first hear that, you think, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because a skirt is on top and a shirt is on top and a skirt is below. But when you consider that hundreds of years ago, there wasn't a shirt. A shirt was something that went all the way down past your knees, and a skirt didn't really exist because it was not easy to manufacture something that just went around the bottom half of the body, because for that you'd need buttons, you need to sew it in, you need to take measurements, stuff like that. That makes it a lot harder to manufacture, to manufacture, to make by hand. Basically, when the Vikings invaded England, they spoke a very similar language to the Anglo-Saxons. And in a lot of words, they would say sh, that what is written as sk, they'd pronounce as sh, like it used to be skip, but now we pronounce it ship, skirt, shirt, right? Mm-hmm. So, but in many cases, one of the words fell out of use, and we only keep the one, we only keep the other. sometimes we keep both and we use them for different purposes. So a ship is a big, it's a big vessel, and a skip is a particular kind of small boat, smaller ship. A shirt is for one type of garment, and a skirt shirt is another type of garment.
Okay, because
Anyway.
that makes sense to me, because I've always wondered why Christopher Robin was dressed up as a girl.
Yep.
Because I'd always seen the pictures in Winnie the Pooh, and Christopher Robin was always depicted as having a tunic, usually a very long shirt. And so, to my eyes, my young American eyes at age 6, 7, 8, 9, I would see that as, why is he wearing a skirt?
So steampunk, you're right. We haven't, although steampunk has definitely been of interest to certain trendy people for a long time. It's curious that it hasn't really made its way into mainstream Hollywood, and I wonder why. Any thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts about this. I began to understand steampunk I would say high school was when it started to come about, so that would be like the late 90s for me. And of course, this book was written in between 97 and 2000. So steampunk started to come up along with cyberpunk and dieselpunk. They were just different forms of science fiction and fantasy. A lot of it had to do with role-playing. There's a popular role-playing series called Shadowrun, and that's completely steampunk. And there's a lot of furries in that as well. But that's dystopic future, digital technology, people plugged into the Matrix, cities the size of continents, that kind of stuff. Being able to hack into a computer with your mind, that kind of stuff. Dieselpunk was also popular among people who did live action role playing, and then I think that there were RPGs for steampunk. It isn't, I think, until the early 2000s that people started to really design steampunk clothing. And there was a band that I had worked with, or the lead singer of a band I had worked with years and years ago. She was part of a band called Abney Park. Abney Park is or was in 2008, 2009, 2010, a steampunk band. So they all had steampunk outfits when they came out, and their music was based on steampunk. On the idea of taking old technology in a dystopic future and infusing it with science fiction elements. So we started to see these subgenres rise up. We've seen cyberpunk again with a lot of movies. The Matrix would be a good example. Dieselpunk would be all the Mad Max films, and I would consider Waterworld to be dieselpunk, but we've never actually seen steampunk. This would be the first time.
I wonder whether the reason that steampunk didn't really appeal for a long time, or the style of steampunk didn't really get pushed much, is that until now, the kind of world depicted in steampunk was quickly made obsolete, in that what is actually available today, what is even conceivable in the not too distant future, is already more technically or technologically impressive than the world depicted by steampunk. If you think back to Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Ocean, the 19th century pre-computer science fiction.
The H.G. Wells.
H.G. Wells
books.
Yes, they basically depicted a very advanced technology using what was available at the time.
I think of War of the Worlds as a perfect example.
Yes,
where
exactly.
the Martians were shot over in canisters, basically.
Yes.
That had to decompress.
Yes.
And then what came out of them were walking tripods that
Yes.
held lasers.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that steampunk might now find that we might now find that people are receptive to steampunk, not because it actually seems so impressive technologically, but rather that it seems quaint. That it seems it's what's the term people like to use? Retro. In the same way that people will. There's a huge market now for records and cassettes.
Well, it's that nostalgia craze.
Yeah.
It's the 80s nostalgia craze that's happening right now.
Yeah. So I think that there could be. I think that I think that might account for it somewhat. But what I expect we'll see in the film is a lot of this imagery mixed with sentiments that are very, very much of this particular time. I suspect the dialogue will have certain references to current cultural trends. Certainly, the prominence of the strong female characters partly to do with the author's original depiction of the characters, but I think what makes it I think that's going to be emphasized in particular because it's still very much in vogue to have strong female characters. The stronger, the better, and the less impressive the male characters by comparison, the better as well. In the current thinking of Hollywood.
And if Ready Player One is any indicator of how the I guess lame duck male lead is treated, then we're going to see in Thomas Natsworthy that kind of lame duck, starry-eyed, C-3PO wandering from scene to scene to scene kind of characterization. Yeah.
Yeah, occasionally wetting himself when he gets scared.
He does, yeah, that's a scary thing. That's what's fucked up, man. But, he's being played by a British heartthrob. I forget the guy's name, and everybody's supposed to be really like, he's going to be the draw for the teenage girls.
He'll be the... Is it Hugh Grant in the 4 Weddings and a Funeral?
Yeah.
I suspect he'll be a young Hugh Grant, sort of stuttering, shy. What's the word I'm looking for? Retreating sort of character. There's only one bit where he shows himself to be very brave. That's at the end with Shrike. But beyond that, he really does just get dragged along for the most part.
Yep, his name is Robert Sheehan.
Robert Sheehan. Sounds familiar.
I know.
Yes.
He looks like cookie cutter Hollywood heartthrob, or British heartthrob. He looks a bit like never mind. The name's completely fucking going over my head right now. One thing before we wrap up, I'll ask you the question, and then we'll both answer the same question. If you lived in the world of Mortal Engines, would you be a tractionist or an anti-tractionist? That's
a good question.
Would you live on London or live on one of the traction towns, or would you be an anti-tractionist and live on dirigibles and hiding behind barriers?
That is a really good question. Of course, the answer is that it depends on where I was born. Had I been born on London, then I would be a tractionist. Had I been born at or what's the name of the place?
Batmongompa.
Batmongompa. Thank you. Then obviously I would be an anti-tractionist. But let's say hypothetically, if I had a bird's eye view of the world, I think that I would be an anti-tractionist, because it goes back to my somewhat superficial historical analysis, which is that the tractionists and the anti-tractionists are really the nomads and the citizens, the civilized men of this future post-apocalyptic world. And as we can see, a tractionist world is really not a sustainable one. They can stretch it out for a while, but eventually the cities just consume each other, they run out of resources, and then they have to go and do more of that. So I think I'm going to say that I'm a pretty severe anti-tractionist. I think that the fewer traction cities there are, the better, and the more quickly they can be brought to an end, the better. And in the meantime, I would be very keen on maintaining and building that wall.
Okay, that's an interesting answer, because my answer is very, very simple, but completely opposite. I'd be a tractionist.
And why is that?
Because I'm a romantic at heart, man. And there's something romantic about being on top of man's greatest creation, and also part of his destruction too. And I think there'd be a caveat, which would be that I would be top tier.
Of course,
not be bottom tier, not be living in the gut, basically. Because in the book, they start using human excrement as fuel source.
Yeah.
So I would not want to be working in the gut.
No.
Definitely, definitely would be top tier. Yeah. On standing up at the park, with the wind blowing through my hair, and looking up and seeing, the beautiful blue sky above with clouds and some of the airships tethered to the top tier floating above you, to look down and see these layers as if you're looking through time. You see, like, the layer below you has buildings from the 20th century, and then below that's the 18th century, and further down you get down to like the 14th century, 15th century. Having the best food, dressing in nice clothing, enjoying the finer things in life until your lifestyle catches up with you. But again, it's that romantic notion of having the best and living in being on top of man's greatest achievement.
Well, there is something to be said for the adventure, for waking up and seeing a different landscape every day. That's something I could get behind. But if I'm going to see a different landscape every day, I'm quite happy to travel. I don't need to take the whole bloody city with me.
That's true. And it would be really cool to see the world from Airhaven.
That's true. Actually, you know what? If I can answer that, I would live on Airhaven. Because on Airhaven, they speak lots of different languages. It's very multicultural. You get to have lots of different food. You can go and check out all sorts of different places. Always people with interesting stories. I would be an Airhaven guy myself, but I would be more sympathetic to the people on the other side of the wall, the people who are out there in Batmongompa. I think they'd be my kind of people. I'd like to drop in on them, chat with the farmers a bit, have some of the nice spicy food. Because I guarantee you, the food in London, like, if you think the food in England now is crap, can you imagine what would happen if the people in London couldn't really trade? It would just be bangers and mash all day long.
In the book, they were starting to use human excrement to make food to build to feed the lower tiers.
Yeah, well, that's not exactly very different. That's not terribly far removed from what they eat today. The English food is terrible. It's actually quite remarkable how